the way, I turn it over to you, Catherine, to lead us off with today's webinar.
Great, thank you, Grant, and welcome everyone to the 2022 Small Farms Winter Webinar Series, hosted by University of Illinois Extension's Local Food Systems and Small Farms team. I'm Catherine Pereira, a local food systems and small farm educator in Cook County, and your moderator for today's session. We're so glad you've joined us for this series. As always, we plan to begin and end within the space of the lunch hour. So help us do this by putting all your questions in the chat box, and we'll do our best to make sure they're all answered at the end of the presentation. This week's presentation on the Illinois Home to Market Act is from Mary Liz Wright. Mary Liz Wright is a nutrition and wellness educator for the University of Illinois Extension, serving Clark, Crawford, and Edgar counties. She is passionate about improving the lives of the people of Illinois. Her blog title, Be Smart, Eat Well, Get Healthy, is exactly what she hopes people gain from attending her programs on food safety, food preservation, chronic disease, and basic nutrition. Sharing research-based information from the University of Illinois enables her to help people make good lifestyle choices that, in turn, make their lives better. She believes people who eat well do better in school, perform better in the workplace, and are contributing members of their communities. Wright earned a bachelor's degree in theology from Loyola University of Chicago and a master's degree in family and consumer science from Eastern Illinois University. She is currently a member of the National and Illinois Extension Association of Family and Consumer Science. And Mary Liz, I'll let you take it away from here.
Well, thank you very much. And I am absolutely thrilled to be here. And let me get my slides on here. And I need to switch that then. There we go. So welcome. Thank you all for joining us today. It is a wonderful time to be in the cottage food industry because there are great changes coming down the pike as of this past January, and Extension has been a part of all that, and we are excited to share the information with all of you today. I'm going to turn off my camera now, but please feel free to type questions in the chat box, and then we will address those at the end. My colleague Jenna Smith and I, who is also a nutrition and wellness educator, have been working on the cottage food updates and the cottage food law for several years now. And I want to definitely share the credit of this presentation with her. So cottage food, why does it matter? Really, what is it? Well, before the cottage food law, entrepreneurs could only make food in a commercial kitchen. So if someone was really interested in developing a food product for sale to the public, they would have to go to the expense and time and effort involved in building and or renting a commercial kitchen, which was quite a burden for some folks. And so starting in 2012, the Illinois Stewardship Alliance, along with Extension and the Illinois Department of Public Health, worked to pass the cottage food law. At that time, there were only a limited number of non-hazardous foods allowed for sale. And then we jumped to 2018, where the list of allowed foods was expanded. And now here we are in 2022 with the most recent update to the law called the Home to Market Law, or Senate Bill 2007. And what it did was expand the point of sale to include cottage food operators' homes, fairs, festivals, pop-up events. It also allows online sales as long as they're direct to consumer, shipped within Illinois, and of course, containing non-potentially hazardous food. It also includes clarification on acidified and fermented foods. And I'm going to touch on all of those points as we go along. So this gives you a little snapshot of the actual law and a definition of really what is a cottage food operation. And right there in the law, it just says that an operation is conducted by a person in their kitchen, primary domestic residence, or appropriately designed kitchen on a farm. Plain and simple. So if you are asked by someone or you yourself are interested in getting started on this grand adventure of cottage food, how do you get started? Well, you must take an ANSI, well, that's American National Standards Institute approved Certified Protection Managers course to receive that Protection Manager certification. Once you have done that, then you will need to register with your local health department, fill out an application, and on that application, you will be asked to list what foods you intend to sell. And sometimes you are asked to pay a fee. So registering with the health department is really your second step in the process. And when you do that, they will probably talk with you a little bit more about your products, because some products, those acidified foods that we're going to, again, touch on later, might require a food safety plan. And so that's something that you can work out with your local health department. Well, as of this January, the where can I sell question has been really blown up. Actually, you can sell it from your home, public events. So you can continue to sell at farmers markets, which was the original location, but also fairs and festivals and other pop-up events. And as I said, we can also sell online. The thing to remember is that in order for it to qualify as a cottage food, so in order for you to be able to create these products in your home, you must only sell direct to the consumer. Now, what we mean by that is you can't sell to a grocery store and they then would resell your product. Same thing with a restaurant. You also can't sell like on commission. You can't put, for example, jars of your jams or jellies in a craft store and have them sell it for you. You really need to be present or have an employee or a family member present so that we have that direct to consumer link. The permanent structures open to the public for retail sales. So sometimes like around holiday time, particularly in our small towns, there'll be little pop-up events. And for the most part, those are allowed. However, there is still some discussion about perhaps a permanent structure, retail facility, open 365 days a year. Stay tuned on that. There's still some discussion going on. You can also deliver to the customer. You can have third party can pick up with consent. So someone can send someone else to pick up their product, but just as long as there's a consent there. And they can come to your home as long as your particular municipality does not have very strict zoning laws that would prohibit sales out of people's homes. So you might want to check into that as well. All right, so the next question comes then, what can I sell? Well, any food or drink not on the prohibited foods list. So see, the cottage food law has kind of been flipped over on its head, beginning really in 2018, where we went from, in 2012, a very short list of foods allowed. Now we simply state foods that are not allowed. Remember, this is a list about cottage food. So usually the question comes up that we see people selling eggs or meats or cheeses at a farmer's market. And those require special licensure, certification, inspections. So yes, they're sold at farmers markets, but those vendors, those producers have gone through a separate set of certification. So on the prohibited list, meat, poultry, fish, dairy, eggs, except as an ingredient, those egg-based baked products, garlic and oil because of the association with botulism, low acid canned foods. So you're not going to want to see any green beans or vegetables, or this is the reason that we have very strict suggestions and requirements on acidifying foods that you're going to be selling in the canned or preserved state. Sprouts, cut leafy greens, the tomato, melon, really G through K have been associated with national outbreaks of foodborne illness. So that's why they're listed. And then we talk about the wild mushrooms, alcoholic beverages, and then kombucha, which is a fermented beverage. Drinks are allowed, and this also gets pretty confusing. Of course, you're not going to be selling alcoholic drinks as cottage food. And again, you might go to a farmer's market where they are selling alcoholic drinks, but those are totally separate. Commercial entity with a liquor license will be doing that. So to qualify for cottage food as a beverage, the beverages are made in the home, packaged in sealed containers. Now, if they're shelf stable, they must be acidified and processed correctly in a boiling water bath, or they can be bottled and sold as chilled drinks. Must be transported and held at 41 degrees or below. So what we mean by that is there's also some confusion when we see concession style stands at farmers markets, where perhaps they're making flavored lemonades or coffees and they're preparing it for people to drink on site. That is a temporary food permit concession stand. Again, different registration and licensure requirements. Now, that's not to say that someone couldn't come to a stand, buy the bottled shrub, for example, a vinegar-based drink, and drink it on site. That's fine. But the whole preparation concession style stand is not cottage food. Another obstacle for some folks is the dairy products. We talked about that in the list of prohibited foods. However, if you're selling baked goods containing cheese, the local health department may require you to submit a recipe to a commercial laboratory or go through some other food safety plan. Really, this is up to the local health department. And then all canned food must be properly acidified. And we'll hit on that here in a minute. One recent update, again, came with the 2022 update to the law is now buttercream icing is allowed. And that was quite controversial for several years. Back to the canned foods. What does it mean to acidify a canned product? I've stated that several times. Foods must be properly acidified. Well, what does that mean? Well, the USDA identifies or defines an acidified food if the final pH is 4.6 or below. So in order to do that, you need to add specific amounts of acid. And those directions are included if you use a USDA or a Cooperative Extension Service recipe. Now, we have lots and lots of folks who make really good products, and they'll call they call an extension office and say, my family and friends say that I make the best salsa in the world, and they want me to bottle it and sell it. And to which we must respond, well, if you are making up the recipe, you need to have that recipe tested at a commercial lab in order for it to be declared safe. And we have on our website a list of those labs who will test individual samples. The best thing to do is to use a USDA or Cooperative Extension Service tested recipe. Those have been proven and researched and declared as safe. And so if you're talking about tomatoes, pickles, sauerkraut, kimchi, or chilled coleslaw, those are the items that we're talking about that would need acidification. How can you sell acidified or fermented foods? Well, again, you need to use a recipe that has been approved, or if you're using your own recipe, a food safety plan every year and a pH test every 3 years for each category will be required by your local health department. So when you register, remember I said they're going to ask you what foods do you intend to sell. If you're talking about selling some of these acidified or canned or fermented foods, then you need to take that next step. If you're selling cakes and cookies, then this doesn't matter at all. Our concern from a food safety and a health standpoint is about the acidic level of canned foods. So just a little bit of a info about canned tomatoes. And this is if you're canning for home use or if you plan to sell it. Tomatoes fall in that neutral kind of category as far as the pH scale of fruits and vegetables. And so they need to be acidified. And we can do that with a tablespoon of bottled lemon juice per pint. When we're talking about home canned foods, we are talking about food that has been heat processed under USDA guidelines to render it safe. There are two methods of canning, and so when we talk about cottage food, we're only talking about the kinds of foods that can be processed in a boiling water bath, meaning those foods that have an acidic level or a pH reading of 4.6 or below, either naturally, such as fruits, jams, and jellies, or after they have been acidified, such as tomatoes, pickles, pickled products, figs, or foods that have been naturally fermented, again, crock pickles, sauerkraut, or kimchi. And just to highlight, the other method of food preservation is pressure canning. And these are for the low acid foods, combination foods, and these canned foods are not allowed in a cottage food operation. Why do we write that in bold print? Well, because of the deadly bacterium Clostridium botulinum. We've all heard about botulism, and it's something that we certainly want to take seriously. All right, so some common questions that we get all the time. Can I can corn? Can I sell canned corn? The answer is no, unless sufficient acid is added. So you can make corn relish or corn salsa, but not canned corn. How about pumpkin butter? No, again, unless it is properly acidified. Pumpkin is a low acid vegetable, and in fact, USDA does not recommend canning pumpkin butter or any mashed or pureed pumpkin or winter squash. While acidifying the pumpkin butter may be allowed as long as it has a pH of 4.6 or lower. But again, this is going to be pretty hard to do in a home kitchen, so we don't recommend it. How about mustards or other condiments? Yes, absolutely. You want to watch the amount of alcohol that is added. Some people are doing that these days, and so there are rules about adding alcohol to products, and we're going to hit on that here in a couple of slides. Pepper jelly, again, something that is hugely popular right now and absolutely delicious, but you must add sufficient acid. Tomatoes, we talked about that. Absolutely, as long as they're properly acidified. However, remember that prohibited foods list. So if you're selling spaghetti sauce, there can be no meat, dairy, or cut leafy greens in your spaghetti sauce. Here we come with the alcohol used as flavoring. So if you want to make a rum cake or some bourbon infused dessert, you can, as long as the alcohol is less than 5% by volume. So let's contrast this with another very popular item are the flavored extracts. And so these are certainly more than 5% alcohol by volume. Alcohol is the main ingredient in these. And so this is where there's lots of discussion going on right now because it is very popular. However, what we would recommend is that you consult your local liquor commission. You can find that through City Hall usually, and you might want to ask them. We talk about chilled and frozen products available for sale through Cottage Food. And the reason we include this slide is so that people understand that you do not have to go out and go to a great expense buying a commercial a cooling unit, or also then you would have to have a generator on site. And so the law states that as long as the chilled food can be held at 41 degrees or lower, frozen foods held at 32 degrees or lower, as long as you can maintain that, you can use an insulated, hard-sided, cleanable cooler with sufficient ice or other cooling means. You do not have to go to great expense to keep things cold. Labeling requirements. These are fairly strict and very specific. And so every item that has more than one ingredient must have a label. And on that label, there needs to be the name and county of the operation, the common name of the food product. So if you want to call your condiment Big Bud's saucy sauce or what have you, you need to have also on there that it is a hot sauce or a barbecue sauce. The date the product was processed, the registration number that will be given upon registration with the local health department, and the phrase, "This product was produced in a home kitchen, not subject to public health inspection." So that phrase needs to be on every label, and it also needs to be on a placard at the point of sale. There also needs to be an ingredient list, including any colors, artificial flavors, and preservatives listed in descending order by weight using common names, and allergen labeling as specified in federal labeling requirements, which here's an example of that. You must identify if any of the ingredients are made from the 8 most common allergens. And so you'll see there, this is just a little sample, and they just have in bold the allergens. Here's another example of a food label. And there you have the disclaimer at the top, the ingredients, and here's the allergy listed, and then the name of the producer, registration number, and production date. I said you also need the disclaimer at the point of sale. And so this needs to be large enough to be read if people come up to your stand. If you're doing online sales, this also has to be prominently displayed at the point of sale. And so as people are ordering, they need to see this disclaimer on your page. Sampling is often very popular. So people can try new things, and from a producer standpoint, of course, you want people to try your fabulous products, and then it might convince them to buy it. And so there are 2 ways that you can offer sampling. Now, this being said, some farmers markets have additional or have had for the past year or so the additional requirements or prohibitions of sampling due to COVID protocol. So you might want to check that out with your farmers market. Anyway, if sampling is allowed, you have 2 options. You can prepare individual sealed containers in your home. And by sealed, I don't mean processed and canned, but just a little top to protect them. You can do that at home and hand them out at your point of sale. No sampling certificate required. But if you want to create those samples on site, you want to cut off pieces of your cake, for example, or little spoonfuls of jam or jelly, you can obtain a sampling certificate from your local health department. Excuse me. It's a 3-year certificate. If you have a certified food protection manager certificate, which you would if you're the owner of the business, no additional training is required. If not, if you're sending an employee or a family member to the point of sale, then they will have to have taken the food handler training. And you can get that online, or many extension offices offer that as well. And so if you do prepare samples on site, the local health department will ask that you set up a hand washing station. Now, this isn't as intimidating as it sounds. It can be as simple as a water cooler filled with warm water, as long as it has a spigot that is free flowing. So not one that you have to compress with your thumb in order for the water to come out, but one that has a little handle that you can turn, and then you have a free flow of water, so you can put both hands under the water and wash them properly with soap. You also need a wastebasket, something to catch the water at the bottom. And just to kind of recap, what are the requirements? You must be registered with a local health department. May include a fee, may not. But in that agreement, in that registration, you agree that if in the event of any consumer complaint or foodborne illness outbreak, you are agreeing to allow the local health department to come to your home for an inspection only upon complaint. They're not going to come out and inspect your kitchen just because you're selling cottage food. That's not something that's going to happen. There used to be a gross receipt of sale, no longer is. And again, the person preparing the products needs to have a certified food protection manager certificate. If you live in the city of Chicago, they have additional certifications. And like I said, the IDPH, the Illinois Department of Public Health, may invoke cessation of sales if the product has been found to be misbranded, adulterated, or not in compliance. So that's the basic nuts and bolts. The great news from Jenna Smith and I's opinion is that we have an online cottage food operator course that answers nearly every question, takes you step by step, scenarios of what ifs. And this course will be available very soon. We're hoping to send it to the reviewers next week. And once that has been done, we will be able to then open it up to students. There will be a nominal fee involved, and you'll receive a certificate at the end. There will also be opportunity to interact with both Jenna or myself if you have questions along the way. And so we're very excited about that. Other resources, any extension office can steer you in the right direction. Your local health department, Illinois Stewardship Alliance. Illinois Extension has for several years had a website called Garden Gates to Dinner Plates, where we have shared information about cottage foods. Well, with the new law coming out this January, we pulled that website down, and it is under construction. And again, kind of like the course, we hope it to be out very soon. One thing that to draw your attention to is that we have on our website a list of the professional labs that will test the pH of products for individuals. And so it gives you a starting point if you wanted to go that route. And again, under construction, updating with a panel. There's a group of us, Jenna and myself, Illinois Stewardship Alliance, IDPH, and some cottage food vendors who are all on a committee, and we're revising the Illinois Cottage Food Guide. Again, we have another meeting tomorrow. We're getting closer and closer to having this document complete. And once we have that, this will be on our website for you to download. And it's a very comprehensive guide that you will find useful in the cottage food arena. In addition to those things, you heard me make several references to using tested and approved recipes. Well, you can get this at the National Center for Home Food Preservation. The University of Illinois Extension offers food preservation classes. We also have a food preservation website where there are step-by-step instructions about how to can and preserve food properly, and even step-by-step videos on there as well. In addition to all of those resources, there's also an Illinois Cottage Food Entrepreneur Facebook group that's very active. People like to chat with one another, best tips and so forth. And I'm not going to say that I monitor that Facebook group, but I do try and jump on occasionally and answer questions. The best way, though, to get the most accurate answer to your question is to contact your local health department or Jenna Smith or myself. And I will type my email address in the chat box here in just a second. And so that being said, that is, in a nutshell, a little information on cottage food.
Great, thank you so much, Mary Liz. We've launched a demographic poll, so for all of you online, please fill that out. It helps us continue to bring presentations like this to you. We've had a really lively chat box, and I'd like to just start it off with answering the question on microgreens. We're lucky enough today to have Zach Grant, local food systems small farm educator in Cook County online, and he's going to address the microgreens question that always comes up. And we'll give Mary Liz a little break for a second. Zach, Grant, can you unmute Zach, please?
Yes, he's been unmuted, so he should be able to unmute himself.
Thanks. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. And feel free, Mary Liz, to jump in if there's anything I'm overlooking. But my understanding as it relates to microgreens, I put a little information in the chat box related to that. There's some very clear definitions within the cottage food rule that differentiate microgreens from sprouts, which is the most important thing, because sprouts is one of those prohibited items on that cottage food list. But both the FDA and clearly the State Department of Public Health is differentiating between microgreens and sprouts as two completely different things. The other important thing to look at is that definition of cut leafy greens. That definition of cut leafy greens does not include the harvest step. What they mean by cut leafy greens is if you're taking any sort of leafy green and preparing it into some sort of chopped salad or prepared salad. So that's my understanding of that. And so microgreens are allowed, but microgreens are allowed in the same way that any other raw produce item is allowed. The FDA sees microgreens as what we would call covered produce, a raw agricultural covered produce item. So it wouldn't be included in this prohibited list. So it is a little confusing when you read through the definitions, but microgreen sales are okay as raw items. In terms of their inclusion in a cottage food item, that I think that's a little bit more of a gray area as you read the definition. Mary Liz did bring up a very important point that comes up all the time when we get these questions about microgreens, is this question about, can I grow microgreens in a home operation, like in my basement or in my garage in a light bench system? And there's never been a very clear answer to that question. However, what she did bring up that I thought was really illuminating, that I often tell people, is there may be some very restrictive zoning ordinances around what types of businesses you can conduct at your home, or if you can sell items from your home. So it sounds like there still is a distinction there, and it sounds like some municipalities could kind of rule on that differently, or maybe different county health agencies could rule on that differently. So I hope that helps clarify that. And Mary Liz, if you have anything to add to that, I'd like to hear your insight as it relates to questions around microgreens.
No, Zach, you're absolutely right. That's exactly what I've been telling people. And that the whole microgreens is more like produce, right? So it's not, you're not really doing anything besides the harvest cut to sell these things, and they're not sprouts. They're a baby lettuce or a baby spinach, or so absolutely. And again, with the zoning laws are also, and I would say, well, I'm not even going to say it, but your larger municipalities are probably where you might have trouble with the zoning laws. But
I see Rob is asking about dehydrated microgreen powders. It does look like there is, if it doesn't clarify that if it's frozen or dehydrated or something, those further steps that would be allowed too. It seems like there is a little gray area because in their definition of leafy greens, they're saying the harvest step doesn't count, but you clearly can't make it into a prepared salad, but they're saying microgreens aren't leafy greens. So does that mean you could take microgreens and
it gets a little muddy there. You're exactly right. I look at the dehydrated microgreen powders as similar to teas and herbs that are definitely allowed as cottage food. So I think the similarity there is undeniable, and should therefore be allowed. So
Yeah,
Okay,
I think that answers that question.
yes, I believe so.
great. So I'm going to kind of build off that. We had a question asking about why can't I sell dehydrated tomatoes under the cottage food law?
Right. And, I noticed, I noted on that prohibited list, and you saw it was like F through K or something on that list, where I said, look at these, and the reason they are on there is because they have been associated with larger foodborne illness outbreaks. And so kind of like, we make a blanket statement to ensure the safety of the most people. And so that's why that's there. And the list was developed by IDPH with some consultation, not from Extension. We weren't on that committee, but their reasoning is because they have been associated with foodborne illness outbreaks.
Got it. Thank you.
Mhm.
And another question that I've seen come up quite a few times and heard asked is about cream cheese frosting. Is that still prohibited? And is
It
it
still
allowed?
is, right? It still is.
Okay. Is it allowed on a baked good?
No. And we're making incremental steps on that. So we got the buttercream, yay. And cream cheese is a little harder sell because just the notion that it has it does require a refrigeration. Anyway, even if you go to a bakery, there's cream cheese on the carrot cake. Quite often you'll see that in a refrigerated holding facility because of the cream cheese. And again, it's one of those blanket deals that made to benefit the most, but sometimes doesn't make a whole lot of sense in particular.
Great. I'm going to keep going with the specific product questions. There's a little theme here. What about
Okay.
frozen pesto sauce?
Frozen pesto has cheese in it, so no.
Okay, no frozen pesto sauce. Here's a labeling question.
Mhm.
If I use chocolate chips or peanut butter in a product, do I need to list the ingredients of the chips and the peanut butter?
Try, yes, yeah, you do, and you'll notice that on labels when it just says like flour, there'll be like if the flour is fortified with B vitamins and so on and so on, and so you could put chocolate chips and then in parentheses the ingredients of the chocolate chips, and that's really to protect you.
Got it. Oh, and then there's sort of a follow-up to the pesto in the chat. How about frozen pesto without cheese?
Frozen pesto without cheese. Are you cutting the leafy greens up to make the pesto? See, that we go back to that whole gray area of how are you treating the greens or the basil in this case before you put it in, and then also does it then become garlic infused oil? So there's kind of a gray area there as well. So yeah, I'm sorry, that's one of those funny gray areas. Excuse me.
Related to labeling, can you review the top 8 allergens again?
Sure. Fish, shellfish, soy, wheat. Hang on, let me get my list just to make sure.
I think peanuts, tree nuts.
Yeah, peanuts, tree nuts. I should know all this, shouldn't I? Milk, eggs, wheat, peanuts, tree nuts, soy, fish, and shellfish. We were both right there, Catherine.
Yeah.
Put us together.
Has sesame made the list yet? I know sometimes there's some talk about sesame coming.
Right,
onto the
not
allergen
yet.
list. Not yet.
Yeah.
But it might be something to be aware of, that there's quite a few people who are allergic to
Right,
sesame.
yeah. As a courtesy, you might want to make note of that.
Yeah.
And
Again,
things like the MSG also,
Mhm.
some people are sensitive.
Again, another question with labeling. Does the entire address need to be on the label or just the county?
Just the county. Used to be, prior to, it was the entire address. and now it's just the county.
Got it. Let me check some more things. We have some questions about very specific to certification for Chicago. Do sellers living outside of Chicago, but selling in Chicago, are they required to get that special Chicago certification?
You will probably have to check. Many farmers markets in Chicago do not allow cottage food at all. So you'd want to check with whatever market you want to sell in, check with that farmers market manager first. But when it comes to the registration process, you register in your home county where you are producing the foods. So let's say you live in Kane County, you would want to go through the Kane County Local Health Department to get all your certifications. But then before you go to sell in Chicago, you'll want to check with the farmers market managers there and ask what sort of certifications are required.
We've gotten another specific product question pop up in the chat. It's about a spice mix with tomato powder. Is that allowed?
Well, dehydrated tomatoes are not allowed, are they?
Right. I'm not sure what they mean. If I buy and just mix it, is it allowed?
No, and I understand what they're saying is they're
Okay.
buying from a commercial entity. It should be safe, but we have to go by the list of prohibited foods, and we don't want to vary too far from that.
Got it. We had some questions about, one was, can I buy a pH meter and test my own goods?
You can buy it one, but you're not going to be able to produce the evidence that a commercial lab would. And these commercial labs, I spoke with all of them on the phone, verified all of them with all of them. They will deal with individuals, and usually the fee for a pH test is $15 or $20. And if you have to do that once a year, that's pretty good insurance for yourself.
So $15 or $20 for a lab?
Around there,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, we had some questions about that as well.
Mhm. They're super nice people. Everyone that I talk to are very accommodating.
And I do think you covered this. How much does an ANSI test certification cost? Was it $50?
It varies greatly.
Okay.
Depending on, you can take a course online and the exam, and those, I don't know, but well over $100. Local extension offices, there are 7 of us educators throughout the state, and we offer them. And it also varies with whether you have to rent a room or what have you. I usually charge a little over $100, and that includes your exam and your book and the class. Community colleges offer it. There's a community college down in my neck of the woods. I live in East Central Illinois that offers them for free. So just look around.
Okay, we had some questions too about about recipe development. And the question is, can you use recipe from other states' extension services?
Absolutely. Any
Okay.
state extension. Yes.
Got it. All right. Maybe you can see this one in the chat too. If I fill out my cottage application and list cookies as the product I'm going to produce and sell, and then later decide I want to produce and sell chocolates or marshmallows, do I need to contact my health department or update my application?
Yes. Yeah. Just give them a call and they can update your application.
So probably updating always with any changes are good.
Any changes. And the reason for that is, and the reason we want to have, the reason the local health departments want to have that on your application is, in the very unlikely event that something would happen, it's all about traceability, right? And so if they have on file that producer X is making cookies and someone comes down with an illness and says, well, I bought these chocolate covered marshmallows at the farmer's market. So the local health department is going to go back and look through those applications, those registrations, and they don't see anyone selling chocolate marshmallows. So they don't even know where to begin to look to trace it back. Does that make sense?
I think that's good advice anyway. Just stay in touch and
yeah,
get to
stay in
know
touch.
your health inspector.
Exactly. So your local health department is your colleague, not your enemy.
Right. They're there to help you stay
Yes.
compliant and so that you can stay in business. Right.
Right. And none of us No one on the planet wants to make anybody else sick, right? So they want to work with you to ensure that.
Okay, we have one more question. Again, it's about this tomato issue. Can we use freeze-dried tomatoes in the spice?
Well, again, let's just recheck that prohibited foods list. Cut or dehydrated, freeze-dried. Freeze-dried would mean dehydrated by a different method, wouldn't it? I think we're splitting hairs there. And I absolutely admire your passion. And maybe someday, that's going to loosen up a little bit. But right now, dehydrated means by any means, however you have taken the moisture out.
Are we, I think you are going to get a copy of this presentation. I saw some questions about sharing different slides again or different resources. So you will get those for the people asking about the USDA recipe website, etc. So you'll get your presentation and you'll be able to see all of those. So I'm going to skip those questions. We're getting a lot more specific questions here in the chat. And here's one from Amy. Is there a plan to create a cottage food class for the food safety certification? The restaurant manager course is about 90% unrelated.
Yes, Amy, I agree with you. Absolutely. We did not set up our online course as a official state certification because that would have taken quite a lot longer. We just wanted to get the info out and to the people. If that becomes popular, and we hope it does, then maybe in a couple of years or a certain amount of time, we can rethink that and make it more of a certification. But in the meantime, the restaurant course is all we have.
Got it. Yeah, we can always make things better, can't we? But it's a step-by-step process.
Yeah.
Let me see, here's a question about if I make a pressure can soup and use a recipe, can I switch out spices?
Well, the pressure can soup would not be allowed to be sold as a cottage food. So if you want to do that at home, absolutely. You don't want to change the ratio of the ingredients much, but you can certainly switch out spices. And you can do that with the acidified foods as well. So with your salsas and your spaghetti sauce, as long as you do not change the ratio of the amounts of vegetables put in or the amounts of acid put in, you can change salt and spices, definitely.
Okay.
You can change varieties of peppers as long as the amount is the same. So if you want it to be super spicy and the recipe calls for 3 pounds of peppers, you can make those all the, whatever, Hungarian hot peppers if you want to. But you just can't change the ratio. That's a good question.
Okay. Well, we've answered a lot of questions today. If there's any last ones that we haven't gotten to, please feel free to put them in the chat. There may have been one about mushrooms that I missed. I can't find it anywhere. Okay. So if you were asking about mushrooms, please ask it again. This is your chance. Here's one it's pretty long, so I'll read it out loud. With wild mushrooms being prohibited from sale, what are the requirements of selling cultivated mushrooms such as oyster and shiitake? Would it be the same requirements as selling produce, or are there more extensive requirements to sell cultivated mushrooms?
As far as I know, cultivated mushrooms are produce and would not hold the same restrictions as cottage food. I see there someone is looking for the USDA recipes. Is the National Center? Yes, National Center for Home Food Preservation. That's housed at the University of Georgia, our fellow land grant university, and that's our go-to spot.
Okay, and then there's a specific question about honey. What's the regulations for selling honey?
Right, honey is like a produce. It's it has its own set of regulations, but I think as long as you're under like 500 pounds, I'm just not real familiar with honey. Maybe Grant or Zach or Catherine, do you know much?
I don't know the exact regulations for
Yeah, I'm
honey.
not either.
Yeah, it's
Zach
based
says
on
he remembers.
gallons. So
Okay.
it's like 500 gallons or
That's what I was
less.
thinking. Yeah. Yeah.
There's a honey apiary act that would be what you would be looking for
Mhm.
as far as those.
Okay, that's what I thought. It was a separate deal, not cottage food.
Okay, I think
Okay.
that just about wraps it up. Yep, we have someone answering in the chat, honey can be sold under 500 gallons
Okay.
in its unadulterated
Hey,
form.
that's what we thought. We're
Okay.
good.
So if you get bigger than that, you'll have to do
Yeah.
some work to find out. So thank you so much, Mary Liz. And we will have this recording to you hopefully by tomorrow afternoon. It will come in your email. Thank you for joining us today, and I hope you learned something. Grant is putting the link to the recording in the chat, and it was also shared with you in all emails that you received prior to this webinars. Okay, and we'll hope to see you next week for Doug Gucker's presentation on pawpaws. Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you so much for inviting me. And again, if you have any questions about cottage food, please contact Jenna Smith or myself. I put my email in the chat box earlier. So good luck to all of you and have a great day.
Bye, everyone.